live on a Friday morning, April 29th. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. In the studio is my friend, Mr. Rob Davis. How you doing, Rob? There we are, popping up on the screen.
How are you?
I'm good, man. Happy Friday. It's kind of weird we're doing this show on a Friday morning now, but it's kind of fun because it's like,
I like the energy of it.
what's that?
I like the energy of it.
You like the energy of it? Are you a morning person?
I'm not overly a morning person, but it's also noon, so I'm okay with that
Oh,
time.
that's right. It's noon for you. Well, I mean, and when I say morning, it's 10 a.m. It's not like it's like early morning or anything like that for us here. So, well,
No, I
cool.
am a morning person, though I've been working in school, so I've had to make myself become a morning person.
Yeah, I get that, and I was kind of like been a natural night owl for a very long time because I was a bartender for a long time, and we wouldn't
But
get home until midnight. I mean, not midnight. That's early. We get home at like 3, 4 in the morning, so we would just party, and I usually would be going to bed right around this time back in the day.
yeah,
So it's a nice mix, right? Nice change. I do want to talk about a marijuana topic today. Since it was 420 this
it
weekend.
was.
I know. Did you do anything special for 420?
Celebrated a little.
You celebrate a little bit? Yeah.
Just a little bit,
I mean,
Nothing.
I celebrated at least a little bit every day, I guess, for 420.
I
So
know you do.
I know, and I'm like, and I hadn't pre-packed my bowl for the show today, so that's literally what I'm doing. As people are like, what is he looking down at? Right? Yeah. So I didn't really do much for 420. I was supposed to have a sesh with one of our writers that has written for us in the past, Ben Owens. Great guy, great writer. He has a site called Can Adventure, and so anybody, I highly recommend checking out Ben Owens. We did announcement for 420 to our best judges from last year for the THC Championship. So it was kind of like a 420 gift. We're giving all of our best judges. That means, and if you're a judge and you were a jerk to us, you weren't called. So just so you know, you had to get your votes in on time to us last year, and you had to not be a pain in the ass to work with. So again, if you got your votes in on time and you didn't hear from us, you were the pain in the ass to work with. Just so you.
Okay. Okay.
We have a very extensive blacklist. Um, we do. We don't mess around. We're like, oh, did you complain that your friend got a half a gram more concentrate in his packet than your packet because you guys are doing different categories? Yeah, you're not coming back. It's so funny because it's like people don't realize it's like there's a customer is always right kind of conversation, but for us it's like, well, in our thing we kind of require something of our quote unquote customers. They have to get their votes in on time, and if you don't do that, then you don't get to come back because that's kind of our entire point. But those who
Okay.
do, and they've been with us for years, we just gave them an over 50% discount to come back to be a judge. So it was a nice 420 gift for them. Um,
Nice.
I know it's
Nice.
kind of exciting, and we made our official announcement of the THC Championship launching, and it's going to be starting in June. So we're excited about that. In fact, I don't know. I saw a comment on Instagram from a post we did, and it was a while ago, and it's the kind of comment that really bothers me. And I saw it again because somebody else had done another comment, and they were talking smack about one of the competitors that had gotten third place or second place, which I'm not a big fan of the whole. You guys don't know. They don't know about this competition. But what we do in the THC Championship, if you haven't heard before, because they said, well, how much did they have to spend to buy that trophy? I bought a trophy at High Times once before, which is kind of one of the things why I actually created the THC Championship was because everybody in the industry has this thought process that if you're in a competition like High Times, the highest paid sponsors win. And
Okay. Okay.
we don't allow anybody who enters in our competition to be a sponsor of the competition. So that's the first thing. So like every one of our competitors pays the same price. They pay the entry fees per entry. We give them discounts when they buy bulk entries, but that's it. I mean, and everybody gets the same deal. There's no special treatment if you were an advertiser with us or you're my friend. I don't care. I don't judge your product. I just facilitate a competition where people judge it. And so that's one of the things that's different about us is it's not some private mansion room that High Times rents out for a bunch of people and they all get high and just I mean everybody's going to get high when they do our competition, don't get me wrong. But they, you know, it's very much about what the people choose and what they choose is the best, which is one of the reasons why we are considered like the gold standard of how to run a competition. So I take a little bit of offense, but I also kind of get it when somebody's like, "Well, how much do they have to pay for that?" And it's like, I look at it like this: if you've, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, if you've had the same bad experiences over and over again, every time you meet another person on your first date, you immediately assume that they're going to be all the bad things you've had. And I think that's what people feel about with this with competitions in the cannabis industry is like, well, they're all bullshit. And a good amount of them are probably bullshit. I mean, I'm not going to say no, but I know for a fact that because of the way I run this competition, that it's not because I don't get to pick who the winner is. You know, and that that you know makes a big difference. I mean, and we're also very transparent. We share all of our data and results to the competitors, so they can't. There's nobody who's like, well, why didn't I win? And it's like, well, I'm like, well, here's what was said about your product. Here's why. Here were the scores of the top 3 people. So now you know why you didn't make it. You know, and so that's really important. There's another reason why we have a badass competition, and this is one of them. Right here, I'm going to show it. This is one of our trophies. Look at this thing. Like, it's beautiful glass. We call it the Emerald Tower. Other people call it Kryptonite, but I think there's a licensing issue, so we can't do this. This was a 220 trophy. I'm actually going to be delivering this to.
Very. What's the word I want? It's sleek.
It's sleek. It's very sleek. It's very heavy, by the way. A lot of people don't realize it because it's just solid glass. And so it's a nice heavy so yeah, I'm gonna take care of it. But we have the best trophy. So if anybody sees these beautiful in Colorado, you see these beautiful glass green trophies, that's us. And so there are some dispensaries that have quite a few of them up. In fact, I'm about to smoke some bud from one of our most awarded dispensaries, DenRec, and so big shout out to DenRec. They compete every year now for, I think, since the beginning. Well, the grower from DenRec has competed every year since the beginning. And he has won trophies almost every year. Oh, no, every year.
What makes them one of the best? What is the
Ryan Buffkin and Fallon McCaskill, they're actually like a power duo now in the cannabis industry. They've been together for a long time, but Ryan is kind of this master grower, and Fallon has worked under his wing for a long time, so she's now a master grower too. And the guy is just passionate about, like, intense. Most growers I meet are usually like really laid back and kind of chill, and they're really good at what they do. They know what they do, but they love to stay around and hang out with the plants and do that. And Ryan's like that, but he's intense. It's like if a power lifter was a grower, that's Ryan Buffkin. I don't know how to. He's a big dude. He's really strong. He definitely works out. Super intense, and like I think he's one of those guys who kind of idolizes Tom Brady for his excellence and what he does and how he's always prepared and consistent, and like he's mentioned it many times. And he kind of, I think he tries to model himself after, how can I be the Tom Brady of cannabis growing, and how do I keep stepping up my game? And they do. They just grow a great product. Now there are other great and well awarded companies out there in our competition. High Level Health is always right up there, and right up there with them. And there's a whole bunch. I mean, then there's Concentrates. There's a place called Harmony Extracts that just kills it every year. Medically Correct. And for edibles, and then Coda Signature for edibles has won a lot of trophies, and they've been our champion now a couple times because we actually have a champion. It's kind of like the best in show, right? Like, you can't. It's hard to compare. Like, here's the best concentrate or the best shatter compared to the best flower, in the sativa category. But we just go, well, who has the highest rated product of the entire competition, and they're the champion. So, and that's an even bigger trophy, which is really cool. So that's the THC Championship. So anybody out there who thinks that people are buying their trophies with us, they are not. Is the most legitimately run competition. I know because I'm biased and I run. So, it's one of those things I'm very proud of, something that we've created that like really is very successful in its integrity. So anyway, that's exciting. THC Champion is going on. Another exciting gift that we didn't give out on 420, but Congress did, is the Safe Banking Act. Do you know anything about this, by the way?
I'm not sure if I do.
Okay, so here's a big issue with a lot of cannabis legally licensed, state-run cannabis competitions, right? I'm competent, not I'm companies, not competitions. They do not have easy access to banking. Well, they can get banks, and they do have banks, but the banks generally will say, like, say you're like, J.P. Morgan Chase. You'd be like, well, we can only stomach maybe 3 dispensaries in our bank in Colorado, and
Okay.
that's all we're gonna allow. And the reason why banks won't do much is because cannabis is federally illegal. So as a federally legal substance, they feel like they still aren't really fully protected as a federally insured bank, FDIC insured, all that stuff, to cover it. Even though multiple times Congress and Obama administration has said, please bank with dispensaries. So that's what's funny is the government's saying, please bank with the dispensaries, and the banks are like, yeah, well, it's not federally illegal. So maybe you do that, and we'll bank with them. Right? They
Right.
do bank with them, but a lot of dispensaries are still doing more cash than they should because of this, and it's dangerous for them. The employees don't have as many protections because of it. And so safe banking access is going to help out for that in the fact that it's going to be providing a little more options for them. They can't charge major fees. There's something else. They are allowed to actually get potential financial assistance for banking. They can get, you can get more traditional loans. I mean, anybody who's been associated with the cannabis industry or the hemp industry, even hemp adjacent like we are, cannabis adjacent, we have trouble getting loans like any other business. Like we personally have had to take a loan that's an unsecured loan. That's not really an attractive way for a business to do it, but that's our option. We're given options that are like the bottom of the barrel options, right? And then there's also the problem for major investments. So like right now, if you touch the plant, you really shouldn't. You're really not going to be a publicly traded company in America, in the United States. Canada, they're doing it, and a lot of investors are investing in Canadian businesses for that reason because they can invest in the stock market for cannabis-run businesses. We don't have that right now, so you can have single investors can come in and invest directly to your bank, but they can't buy stock if you're touching what we call touching the plant, which means you have to be a licensed entity to touch it.
Okay.
Before it's sold, obviously. And so that's been passed by Congress. It's already been passed like almost every year that Democrats have been in office in Congress. And of course, in the Senate, even though it has a majority of Republicans believe it should be passed, the Senate didn't pass it in 2019 because they just let it sit there because why would Mitch McConnell do anything but appoint judges, right?
Yeah.
I think that's all he does. And so this is finally, we think it's going to pass because we do have, again, majority of Republican support in Congress. It did actually, but we'll find it. And then the Senate will actually be put up for a vote this time around. How about that? But here's the thing I want to mention to people out there is that this is great. It's fantastic that this is happening. It's only one out of what I would call three major things that have to happen for the full legalization, right? And really, there's only one of those things that hasn't happened that needs to happen, which is just decriminalize and deschedule it off of controlled substances. You've heard me say that many times. And then of course, like fully make it legal. Not just schedule it, but fully legalize cannabis. You do that, and a lot of other things go away. In fact, the other problem goes away immediately. And the other problem is there's this tax code called 280E. And for those of you out there who don't know what that is, means you're just not in the cannabis industry. So of course you don't. Why would you? And so, there is that. But 280E is basically the tax code. It was signed into law, I think, in 1986. It was basically the Let's Go After Drug Dealers tax code. So what it means is, if you are a illegal entity, you're a drug dealer. This was for cartels. This wasn't really as much for marijuana, but okay. And so if you were a drug dealer, you would have to still declare and pay taxes on all of your illegal activities. Yeah, I know it's weird, right? So this is a weird. It's just it was more ammunition for them to go after drug dealers. So just like they did for Al Capone. Tax evasion is a big deal. You go after tax evasion, and you now like you have a way to put somebody in jail, whether you can catch them for all their crimes or not. So that's kind of the point of 280E. But the problem is the IRS is very liberally applying that to cannabis businesses who are state legal because they're not federally legal. And the in the wording of 280E, it basically says if you were doing anything that's federally illegal or federal legal, then you still have to be paying full taxes, and you're not allowed to take your standard deductions like any other business. So what that means is they're saying, okay, everybody believes that if you're a legal cannabis business, you absolutely should be paying taxes, of course, and nobody's denying that. That nobody's saying let's not do that. But what they are saying is, hey, let's be able to take regular deductions that everybody else can. That's it. We're talking about millions, billions now, really, of dollars that are being put into into the IRS and paying to them that these businesses shouldn't have to pay. And I'm all for businesses paying their due taxes, absolutely. But when you're starting to make an unfair burden on businesses, and that's what they're doing. I mean, we're looking at 280. If 280E gets taken away from being applied, which federal legalization would do that alone, then we're looking at a huge boon for the industry where they can actually grow and do things. And it gives them a little bit of power because that's money that they could be using towards lobbying. That's money they could be using towards other things that all other businesses do.
Yes.
And so they're not able to do that when you're paying a tax rate that's insane. For some of these, is 30%, 40% of your revenue, your gross, not your profit. It's like it could be a little ridiculous. And so it's a nice step, but again, we're not seeing enough steps from this administration, which we really would hope would happen. And so you have Schumer, who's like, we're going forward with legalization of marijuana already. And that's what the things I love about Chuck Schumer. He's actually said, he's like, well, Biden's kind of dragging his heels on this. We're going to do this. And it's disappointing. And that's what happens when you have an 80-year-old man as president who's basically right in the sweet wheelhouse of all of the prohibition misinformation.
Yeah. And also we have to, again, cannabis has become the acceptable word for, when white people enter the business of marijuana, right? Because it's marijuana. And until we can deschedule cannabis, right? But we have to destigmatize the term marijuana.
Oh, I completely agree. It's funny. There's a thing, and I even wrote about this back in the day in our magazine and an editorial, like one of the first years, and we were talking about how, and I even said, is marijuana the M word, okay? Because it is seeped in racial injustice in America, okay? In Mexico, they're like, it's marijuana, man. I mean, that's my terrible Mexican accent, sorry. But I mean, it's like, it's just marijuana. I mean, that's what we called it. And the thing is we started calling it marijuana in this country as a way to say we're worried about Mexicans coming into our country and they're bringing this marijuana and all the black guys are sleeping with white women and blah, blah, blah. And it was like all this crazy, the whole reefer madness thing, right? Marijuana, the term of calling it marijuana is what really helped create that stigma because until then, farmers knew it as hemp or cannabis. And cannabis was a medicine. It was literally prescribed by doctors in liquid tincture form, and it was given for animals, and vets were using it. We're coming back to all of that, but and so they weren't saying these Mexicans are bringing up hemp because everybody's like, so?
Right.
It was like, Mexicans are bringing up cotton. Everyone's like, so, okay, thanks.
Right.
And so that was what happened, was the whole misinformation of William Randolph Hearst that he created with Harry Anslinger, and it just, steamrolled into, reefer madness that they created. So that's what we have with this president, right? I mean, we had it with Trump too. I mean, we have these guys who have no concept of like what this actually does for people because they're not seeing it personally, and they are still indoctrinated with this whole gateway drug
You're
theories.
indoctrinated with gateway and this notion that there's something that, look, marijuana, cannabis, weed, pot, right? Whatever term someone wants
I
to
like
use for it.
ganja, by the way. I've always liked ganja.
I've always liked weed. The first time I heard it, I'm like,
It's
yeah,
weed. It's
like,
weed.
that sounds good.
You know what sounds
Um,
funny when people say it though? Grass.
weed,
I it does.
oh, grass.
I feel
Yes, I
like
forgot
you've
about
dated your.
grass.
If you call it grass, I feel like you're at least you're definitely a baby boomer. All right. You're like,
Yes,
dude, smoke some
yes,
grass.
smoking grass. You're right.
Absolutely a baby boomer. But yes, go on.
Uh,
Sorry.
no, no, no. But so there's what it does for people, from a medical perspective and how it helps. But there's also, apart from the medical perspective, oh yes, Abner, trees, smoking trees, you're right. Um, it's just chill. Like it's not a,
you know.
people are not, I'm going to say generally, right? Because I can't 100% say, but going out and committing mass murder because they smoked pot,
Yep. No,
because they smoked, rolled some trees. Like they're not. It's the most chill of things.
it is.
Why they can't understand that, like,
Jeez.
blows my. Why they're still holding on to this notion that it's a thing of, it causes violence and culture. Like there's no truth to that.
There isn't, well, we know. I mean, it's pretty much the opposite, and anybody who's probably watching this is already well versed on that side of things. And if you're not, to message me, I'm happy to tell you. What I'm really interested in seeing, and there's some concern that I've heard, and we had it here in Colorado when we legalized it, and it's still a thing that there's a concern for is. Look, legalization is about to happen, right? We have 36 states, 36 that have legalized medical, and 17 that have legalized recreational. All right,
Mhm.
so we're just about there. I mean, first of all, we're already at 36 for medical, and to me, we used to have this thought process years ago. It's like, well, once we hit 26, it's the majority of the states. So is that like going to make it legal? Are we going to get there? Because you would think that that's where we would go, right? I mean, it makes sense.
Mhm.
But politicians tend to the- politicians are like island nations. They're like 10 years behind everybody when it comes to culture and style. You know what I mean? It's like things get there, like you'll get there, but you're like, "Oh, wow, you're listening to that." That was back in the day. Now it's different with internet. But it was like you'd go to a island nation, you'd be like, "Oh man, you're wearing all the styles from like 10 years ago. And they look great on you. All right." And it's like because
Right.
it's slowly the politicians are like that. Like they are like finally they'll sit around and realize they're not in the Washington D.C. bubble, and they look up and they're like, oh wow, everybody's cool with this thing,
Yeah.
and like they just
Yes.
like they literally don't get it, and that's what you have with somebody like Biden is he's so insulated that as most people in that situation would be, right, that I don't think
Mhm.
they really get it unless somebody gets in front of them and tells them. And so oh. Oh, Abner said he did sign people in a violent lifestyle. Can you be violent after smoking? It's sad, but I fear that is the case. Well, I think that's part of it. It's like, look, it's weed's not making you violent, though, right, Abner? I mean, it's like, it's you were already a violent person, so it's not. I think that's the big thing. Is it's like you're not going to take it, and it's going to make you a
It
more
doesn't turn you into a violent criminal. You
no,
may have already been violent, yes, and so you
that's
now
different.
utilize this substance, but it's not making violent. It
Yes.
doesn't create violent people.
Yes. Now there are people who get paranoid. There are people who might find themselves getting a little paranoid, but usually if you get paranoid from weed, you're not smoking the right weed or you're just going to stop. It's like I mean nobody's like I love this paranoid anxious feeling I'm
Right, right,
having
right,
and
right.
I need to get more of that. So
But legalization part
mhm,
is part and parcel, I feel, of police discussions because, and I think we may have touched on this a little bit last time. This drug has been utilized so effectively uh, for issues of race and class, right? Where you had for years upon decades of police, law enforcement harassing, arresting, detaining people for marijuana,
mhm,
right? So that was a part of their job, a part
Yeah.
of their daily, weekly existence.
Hmm.
If you legalize this, right, you were going to, and it's going to lead to another conversation of ours, but you were going to inevitably defund the police because you will not need as many people.
No, and we were going to talk. Obviously, we talked about, start with cannabis and go into this conversation. I mean, obviously, we love to talk about the news of the day or week, and I was like, "Gee, what do you want to talk about this week?"
Obviously, yeah, yeah.
But it really does lead. Like we can talk about the case and all, but I would rather more talk about the, like you said, the reform, police department
Mm-hmm.
reform, and I think that's just part of it. And I'm gonna actually, we'll talk about it. We'll get into it because
Yeah, yeah,
I actually
yeah.
think and we've talked about defund. I won't talk about defunding. I think it's just reallocating funds, and I think there's a lot of money that's being spent on police that could be spent on the police, just on training and like in education. We'll get more into that, um, but back to the this side of the legalization. There is another part on the cannabis front that I was saying we worried that we've seen happen here in Colorado. And it actually, just to tie in the THC championship, we're always looking for, we have judges and we have to judge medical and recreational product here. So you have to have a medical card to be able to judge the medical product. And it's getting harder and harder to find medical judges in Colorado because a lot of people have just let their medical cards lapse and are just buying cannabis, right? Um,
Hmm.
because it
Okay.
works. So here's how it works, by the way, for those of you who aren't in Colorado. If you're a medical patient, um, you can first of all buy more cannabis. You can buy 2 ounces at a time as opposed to an ounce. You can hold more cannabis on you. You also can buy more like potent edibles, and you can buy more of those as well. So it's really a benefit if you have a medical card here. You cost you $100 to get the card, and then you get discounts. Your cannabis is cheaper because you're not taxed as high. You don't have what we apply as a recreational taxes on the cannabis, which is a high tax. Um, and so there's all these benefits to still being a patient, but a lot of people have just been like, yeah. I mean, and I let my slide. I have to go out and get my card again. But they're like, well, I don't really need my card. It would be like, would you go out and get a prescription for alcohol when you could just go buy it?
Right.
And I think that's, but if you realize, wow, I do get a discount, and I mean the buying more alcohol thing. There is, by the way, no limit for people on buying alcohol that I am aware of. Although there are limits on buying cannabis.
Right.
And
Right.
that's
Alcohol has caused more damage and harm in culture
yeah,
than
yeah. Average and Abner mentioned that too. He said alcohol, on the other hand, does make peaceful folks violent, and that is absolutely true. Absolutely true. And everybody out there knows that. So, there's nobody
yes,
denying that
yes.
one. But also, I mean, I, again, there's no limit on alcohol. Alcohol averages 80,000 deaths a year related to
Mm-hmm.
alcohol. It's
Mm-hmm.
80,000 deaths. Okay. Okay, so it's not COVID
Don't get me
unless you
started.
count every year of alcohol for the last
Yeah.
10 years. Every year for the last 10 years. Now we're at 800,000 deaths. And if there was something that killed 800,000 people in 10 years that had to do with brown people doing it, terrorism,
Oh yeah.
sorry, that's my,
Yeah.
or I don't know.
Or poor people or anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's insane like how
Yes.
how
It should be legalized.
disproportionate we are.
But you still have to fight off all the. Again, they're all interconnected. All of these systems and racisms and classisms, they're all so deeply interconnected. Until you fight and destroy the language that's been used against people, you can't
Yes.
really actually
Yes.
change the system.
It is true, and we do need to think about how we talk about things, which is such a great little mini segue there into into the police reform side. So, first off, I want to ask you: did you watch the trial at all?
So I saw very small bits and pieces of the trial. If it happened to be on at the gym, I would see it, not hearing it, obviously just reading the captions. There were a few times that I did watch pieces of it when I was at home. Um, Overall, it was too uh, infuriating to watch it. Um, so
So what
I,
was I
did
have to know what was infuriating about it? Like just that you had to watch it, like you that it was
that
going
we
on, or
even that I even as a black man, as a black person in the United States, had to watch or be present and alive and party to a trial for a murder, like period, for a murder with no questions. There wasn't anything to be figured out. This was all on tape, and
right?
it was sickening to me because of the racism that exists in the United States. If 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 Derek Chauvin was a black man and George Floyd was white, there wouldn't have even been a trial, as far as I'm concerned. They probably would have shot the black Derek Chauvin as soon as they could have gotten to him. Like it wouldn't have happened. There's no other scenario where these things happen, and it's infuriating for me as a black man to have to watch this trial, to have to constantly turn on TV and see another person shot and killed. Um, uh, when these things don't happen to white people. They don't. They don't have an experience of turning on the TV and having to witness a trial. Oh, this guy murdered this guy live on TV for 10 minutes, and now we're
Yep.
still waiting with bated breath to see
Yeah.
if he's actually going to be held accountable. Or oh, these police rolled up and they shot these white girls were fighting in their street, and the cops just rolled up and just killed them. Like it's it's infuriating, and I almost have to intentionally block so much out just to function and move through the fucking world without wanting to strangle someone. So yeah,
And I think that's it because obviously, like one of the things I love about our conversations is you're coming from obviously a very different perspective, and there was very little doubt in my mind that he was going to be found guilty, but that was not the case for most Black Americans, is what you're kind of telling me.
no,
Not for
I
right,
large
and I
numbers of
understand it. I get it, and that's it's messed up because I'm like, well, he's obviously gonna go, now would I have thought he was obviously going to be found guilty 10 years ago? Not necessarily, right? But like I just kind of looked at it and said, yeah, where we are today, where this, I mean, this was obvious. I mean, I would have found him guilty 20, 30 years ago. It doesn't matter what year it was. He was guilty. Um,
but he's guilty because there was a video.
he's guilty because there was a video. Exactly.
If there had been no video, Derek Chauvin would be walking the streets right now.
Yes.
And that's the sickening part, that people are so tired of like, wow, it took a nearly 10-minute video of a person literally being murdered for people to say, oh, okay, I guess maybe they are telling the truth about things that happen with law enforcement.
Yeah. Yeah, Wanda Kelly just said the same thing. If there's not a video of the incident,
Oh,
he
hey,
would
Wanda,
cut it.
that's my aunt.
Is
Yes.
that your aunt? Hi,
Yes.
Aunt.
Well,
I agree though. I mean, if there wasn't a video, he would absolutely not have been found guilty. And I think that comes to a simple like, I just saw a video of a black man on his property, and cops had pulled somebody into the driveway. Did you see this one?
yes.
All right, and now you don't get to
Yes.
see a lot, really. It was fairly short because it gets cut off. But the cop basically arrests him for filming him on his property.
Property. And this is the thing that frustrates so many people, is that there's this constant desire to insist that it's not this, these things aren't racially motivated anyway. I always say to people, if that's not true, then please show me all of the videos, then all of the cases of unarmed white men, but white people in general, being killed by the police, being stopped on their own property, being arrested or pulled over because, like the guy who died 2 weeks ago, Dante Wright, right? Because because he had an air freshener in his window, which is
Yes.
first of all ridiculous that even exists as a thing that's worth. Then you should
Weirdest
stop
law ever.
air
Weirdest. That's
from his.
that's a weird one, by the way. That's one of the weirder laws I've ever heard. Is the air
But
freshener?
they're unnecessary. There are so many.
There
This
are.
is a
There
long
are. There are.
conversation.
It is.
There's
It
so
is.
many laws that most of us don't even know how they came into existence, but we're stuck living under it.
Yeah. Yeah. There is that. But so it's funny because you say you want to say that it's not racially motivated. So if there's people out there saying it's not racially motivated, I agree. First of all, show us the video evidence that it's not racially
Where's the
motivated.
evidence?
Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? But second, I love that argument. Like I don't love the argument. I love like taking it apart because okay, so what's your end game with that argument? If you're saying it's not, so are you saying that we should all be okay with this because it happens to everybody? Is that we say black people, please be okay because it's happening to us too, even though we know it's not. But okay, like let's just accept your truth for a second and live in your weird truth bubble. In your
Yeah.
weird truth bubble, you're saying this is happening to everybody. Then, because if it's not racially motivated, it's happening to everybody, right? Okay,
They
so
can't prove that. They can never show that it's actually happening
but
to anyone.
again, accept their truth for a second, and let's walk down that pathway. And you walk down that pathway, and you're still like, well, why would anybody accept this treatment? This is
Right.
fucking America. Why are we accepting this treatment? So like that's the other thing is like it's just a dumb argument. Like anytime you hear that, it's really there's another layer I think that's in there of racism. There's another layer, and this is I'll call it out on them. Is what you're really trying to say because you're going to say the next step is well we don't have evidence of this happening to white people because it's only the black people who are getting into trouble, and
Right.
that's the next layer of racism under that statement. That's what I'm seeing. Um,
100%.
and it's and again that's that false narrative that goes back to cannabis days. I mean it goes back to but like cannabis was a great
Right,
thing,
right, right.
and to in the prohibition side of things, and it was just like well it's
But
that's why
a large piece of it is also built on, and this, how do I frame this? Because it's a piece of the conversation that you and I were having earlier around masks and vaccines and so forth and so on. It's built around the police and law enforcement issue is built around the notion of compliance, right? That they should just comply. If you just comply with what they said, even if what they said is wrong or you have valid reason to dispute it, you should just comply. Now, there's countless videos of white people who have challenged the police, who have driven off, who have practically run over people. No one shot them. They didn't die. They didn't comply. So only certain people are expected to comply. The other people don't want to because they feel like we live in a culture where you can't just infringe on someone's rights and tell them to comply, which is where I do put the masks and vaccine conversation. Though I'm still, like I said, I'm still willing to wear a mask wherever it's required. I'm not taking the vaccine, but I will wear a mask if that's what a store requires. It's still based in whether people want to agree with it or not. It's still based in the notion of telling people you have to comply with what we say or else.
well again I feel like we've kind of been I'm sorry, I just got distracted by Avner's text over here. I want to have him on the show just to really no because he said he was pulled over in upstate New York many years ago. There was something hanging from the rearview mirror. This is for those of you on YouTube or in Kansas City. He's told by a state trooper that it's illegal because it obstructs the driver's view. He said just an excuse to pull over another long-haired hippie. And then he told him he wanted to search his trunk because he might be transporting snakes. That is totally something you would use on a white person, but not a black person. Is my
Yeah,
guess.
no one's asking me if they thought I was transporting snakes. Drugs, possibly, but not snakes. And Abner makes a very good point. He was pulled over. Obviously, Abner, I don't know you. I'm going by your description here.
Right.
A long-haired hippie. So aspects of his persona broke the idea of a what's the word I want? if he had like a crew cut and he was driving around in
He's
Jeep
more
Cruiser,
counterculture. He's more counterculture. He's not
yes,
fitting the
thank you,
mold
that's what,
of a good white boy. You know.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Got it. Yeah. Totally. I just love the transporting snakes. That's got to be one of that must have been and that was in upstate New York. Well,
That was
upstate New
upstate New York.
York is kind of like the upstate redneck. I guess I don't know. I would have thought that would have been happening in like a swampier area.
But this compliance thing, right?
Yeah.
Because with the guy who drove Dante Wright, right, who was being pulled over, and the cop says, "I thought I was pulling out my gun," right? Which is a lie. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. It looks totally different. She was holding it in front of her face for a few seconds, long enough, even in those few seconds, to realize this is not yellow. This doesn't look anything like my taser. But people's arguments is that well, he should have complied. To which I always say, okay, if your argument is that people should have complied, fine. But are you also saying then that if someone doesn't comply, the police have the right to kill them?
No, no, but look. First of all, I'm still struck on the whole mistake thing. Like maybe it was a mistake. I mean, the video sounded like it could have been a mistake, but at the same point, I think cops are getting pretty freaking clever. And if you wanted to kill somebody, you could say everything she said.
Yes.
You know.
You can say everything you said. Derek Chauvin, if you listen to to the audio of his call with his superior afterwards, he said everything. He lied. He fully lied about everything that happened with George Floyd, but he knew he'd get away with it if he just lied correctly.
Well, you know what cops training they probably take very seriously is how to do those things, right? I mean, it's probably that's like the next level training that they get is like, here's how you're going to get away with making even mistakes.
Who had to have a record expunged, right? Who had to pay to have a record expunged for bullshit that I never ever should have had to have a police encounter around, and to read when I'm utilizing it for a play of mine, brilliant guy named George Vanderbilt Republic. I have the police report. Everything in that police report is a lie. But that's what they wrote. That would have been the case if we went to court. But everything that she said was a lie, but written in a way to make it appear that her actions were justified.
See, I think, look, the camera thing is great. I mean, it's really going to change police force, but they'll find ways to get it. They'll Yeah, Abner said the same thing. He said you have body cameras where they say, oh, stop resisting, and it's incredibly obviously they're not resisting.
Yes.
And it's their way of controlling the narrative. But yeah, like, and speaking towards that, Abner, I mean, you do have these body cam footage videos, and as long as they're on, as they should always be, right, then it's there. The evidence is there, and it's starting to be a lot harder to refute that evidence. And I mean, I think we are at a point where it's potentially changing, but we got to see. I mean,
I don't think so. I don't think anything is changing. Will it potentially start to change anywhere from 20 to 50 years from now? But if someone, again, this girl, I'm going to mess up her name. I think it's Ma'Khia Bryant, the one who was killed in Ohio same day. So the same moment that the Chauvin verdict is being read, this girl is being killed.
Yeah.
We are not, I don't believe that we're anywhere near anything changing. We had this moment because there was a video. There was an undisputed video. But apart from that, he would have walked. So I don't think, no part of me thinks anything is changing at all. Not even close yet.
Do you feel like this could be the beginning?
No, because technically, because of the Rodney King video, we shouldn't even be at this moment in time.
No, it was funny because Jack and I were just talking about it, and she was like, "It's been going on for how long?" And I was like, "Well, videos-wise, it's been going on since Rodney King. I mean, that was the first one, and the only reason why we saw Rodney King, I mean, is that was a news helicopter that
Yeah,
happened to catch that because we didn't have phones, cell phones, and cameras back then, right?
yeah.
Um, you know,
It's like this has been going on for so long. This is not, the George Floyd experience is literally the experience of countless enslaved Africans when they first hit these shores. None of this is new. The only thing that's different is that there are now occasionally cameras, but it doesn't mean it's going to stop anything. And even with the cameras on, if you're so indoctrinated to the notion that you can get away with anything, even if you know there's a camera rolling, it doesn't mean that your behavior is going to stop yet.
I think we'll start seeing. I mean, look, there's already some changes that have happened, right? What was it? Was in Washington State? Who did it just recently? They kind of repealed the the law enforcement bill of rights, so to speak, where they have this like unqualified immunity.
There's a few places that have been trying to
Well,
have
there
been
was
trying to do
one state just passed it, and I'm blanking off the top of my head on it. So if anybody remembers who it was,
But see, it also counterbalances, I want to say, because while that is happening, I also just read where Oklahoma just passed I don't know if it's still a bill or if it's a law yet, that would make people who hit protesters while they were driving, it would give them immunity. So the protesters would be arrested. But if you happen to hit someone with your car and accidentally like kill them, then that would be different because they shouldn't have been blocking the highway to begin with.
what? Wait, I'm sorry.
It's insane.
Okay.
It's literally, it's insane.
So that is one of the things. So we're talking about this whole police reform idea, but what you're saying is very true. Like this isn't going to change, and I agree with you too, Wanda. It's not going to change unless we have some kind of federal standard for policing, and that's something that we don't really have. I mean, because one thing I will say, we do have a federal police force. It's called the FBI. Never heard of FBI doing shit like this. Now they could have, I guess. I mean, but like, there's no videos. There's nothing about that because there's a standard that they uphold. And so that's something that we're absolutely lacking. And we also have this problem with like, how is that going to change when we have towns where you have to deal with sheriffs? You have elected officials to be sheriffs, which they don't have to have in some towns. They don't even have to have experience, like training,
yeah.
like really, like how is that? I mean, and so
the playing field when it comes to police and even when it comes to judges doesn't make sense to me. Like you would think there would be a degree of uniformity across the country, what a cop can and cannot do, but there isn't. You would think there'd be a uniformity to the sentencing, but well, this judge can give you a harsher sentence in this state than the other for the same crime. Like it doesn't make sense.
Well,
it's built in states' rights. I comprehend, but it's not. I don't know.
Well, it's one of the problems that can come from states' rights, right? And that becomes one of those things like, well, if you don't like the laws in your state, you can always go to a state that's more favorable. One of the reasons why, when we legalized cannabis, a lot of people moved in here. Oh, look at Abner's throwing it out. The legislation, House Bill 1674, was passed in 38-10 vote by the Senate and will now head to the governor for signature. They'll sign it. Yep.
And Abner also said that two things.
Yeah.
I want to say two things real quick. Both my aunt, who said that the vaccine cards are potentially going to be used against people to keep them confined, right? Which is already again, I'm sorry. I don't, and I realize I'm not a lone voice. It's been interesting watching people that I know who I also consider to be educated, progressive, left-leaning people who are not taking the vaccine, but feel like they can't say that out loud because they feel like there's a conditioning that's happening where you must say that or else there's something wrong with you. But it's leading to the creation of tiers of citizenship, right? When I hear of all these various sporting arenas and concerts that are going to open and they're going to have a vaccinated only section, other people can sit, like, that's disgusting. That goes against everything this country is supposed to be. I'm sorry. There's no other
That makes
What?
actually no, that actually makes no sense to me, honestly. And and I got the vaccine. I'm getting my second shot in a couple weeks. But like, if you're
And I
vaccinated,
want people who want to get it to get it. That's America. If you
i-
want to get it, get it.
if you're vaccinated, why do you need to have your own section?
Because it has been pumped into culture in a way to suggest that people
Oh,
who are vaccinated are inherently better people.
well, wait. Is it a maskless section then? Is that what they're saying? If you're vaccinated section, you don't have to wear a mask.
No, they would still have to wear masks.
Then that's fucking stupid. Sorry.
It's
Like
it's
I
so
actually, if you said, hey man, you're in a vaccinated section, you can go maskless. That's your little benefit if you want. You can go maskless because you're vaccinated. And like I get, there's gonna be people like you'll probably disagree with that, but I actually think, fine. I understand what you're saying though. I don't like the idea that there's a tier, but there is a little bit of a thought process, um, that like there's a little bit more of a level of safety in the fact that they did just come out with a study. And now here's the thing. I'm not somebody who wanted to get everybody to get a vaccine. I would love it if everybody did, but I understand not getting the vaccine. I really do. And I'm fine with everybody believing their freedom to do it, but I also recognize that the science has shown so far that the vaccine is overwhelmingly safe, right? So far. And I mean, rare blood clots is to me wasn't a reason to shut down Johnson Johnson. I thought that was a little severe of a reaction,
right.
right?
To me, 2% of the population dying is not a reason to make people get a vaccine.
Okay, I got it. I got it. But I think that the study just came out. They're saying that like what they're seeing is people who are vaccinated are showing that they are not spreading the disease as much because you can still get the virus if you're vaccinated. The idea is you're not going to get sick very bad. You're not going to put pressure on our hospitals because you're not going to be one of the people who's hospitalized when you're sick. You're going to be able to get through it a lot easier. And I know there's been no long term. I know. I mean long term for the existence of the vaccine.
For the last 6
So
months.
what they're saying is in the what they've seen in the last 4 months, when it comes to the transmission is, and I don't have the study on me because I didn't think we were going to talk about this part, but is that if you had the vaccine, you're not transmitting it. There's a very low rate of transmission to other people. And that's actually, to me, more important, honestly, as a feature of the vaccine, because that's what's going to help shut this shit down, really. And the thing is, that's just a fact. And the other fact of the science is if you don't wear a mask and you don't have a vaccine, you're more likely going to get it and spread it. That's it. Now, within those, I still believe it's a choice to take the vaccine, but you can argue the liberties, and I believe in the liberties, but you also have to recognize the science on the other side.
I recognize the science, but I'll continue to say I recognize the science, but this is science that is 2% of the population who gets this. I don't know, United States or globally, I think it still works out to 2 or 3% dies versus 97, 98% surviving. But I still believe that the story is being sold as if the numbers are reversed. And that is why people are freaking out. Of course, there are going to be cases. It's a new disease. Of course, there are going to be cases. And of course, there are going to be deaths. It's a new disease. Whenever there's something new, people die, right? I don't say that to be callous. I say that to actually just state a fact, right?
Look, honestly, if what you're saying is true. If we really cared about the deaths, Rob, we would actually be focusing on health and eating right in our country.
Yes, we would be improving neighborhoods so that people don't live near, wastelands, or they have, horrible emissions going into their neighborhood, so they develop, lung problems and respiratory issues. Like I won't say it has nothing to do with COVID, but the issues are significantly more environmental, political, institutionally racist, and classist that's leading to people having the illness, number one. And number two, our hospitals were overtaxed because they made people fear so much that they needed to go to the hospital that they went to the hospital when there was actually nothing they could do for you. What you really needed to do was to be home, right? Because there wasn't anything that the hospital could help you with. They were previously putting people on ventilators. My mother has railed against this forever.
I know.
And I understand and I agree with her, because they never should have put people on ventilators. People were I think there are many people who quote unquote died from COVID, but who died really because they were put on a ventilator. A ventilator is a last resort
I
thing.
know, no, and it's possible, but you also, I mean, look, I don't think we're having. Look, we've already gotten better at treating it.
Yeah.
So the beginning stages this time last year, they didn't know what the hell to do, so they were just throwing shit at a wall, right, and seeing what stuck. And that,
Well,
and
why would they
you
throw
know,
in shit at the wall if they were so insistent that they've been working on this vaccine for 20
well,
years?
that's
Why
different.
they
No, no,
throw
no,
shit
no,
at
no,
the
no.
wall?
Look, again, that's the science of the vaccine, and the RNA technology behind that vaccine was going after coronaviruses in general, and then they could just tweak it. You know, that's like an adjustment that they made this year because of what they had. That's different. Again, that's a science of it. You know, what you're talking about is also like the science of it is like triage science. That's what they were doing. They were just like, what the hell do? We don't know how to operate this, but here's what we're doing. We're treating symptoms, and that's why there were things that weren't being, properly done, obviously. But you know, I think that's just part of it. Like there's a process for science, and we are all patient and impatient about it. Mostly impatient about it, honestly, because we like, well, why isn't it always, the way you think it's going to be? Why isn't it true that like they decided this is what we were going to do, and now and it just changed like a week later because we just learned some more. And I think that's one of the problems I have is that we just sometimes need science to do what science does, and look at and data to me is what really makes a big difference. I get no long-term studies so far, and could there be something down the way that's latent in these vaccines that does something? I mean, it's possible, I guess. I mean, without knowing more about it, but I mean, to me, it seems like what we're dealing with is incredibly safe. It's been administered to millions and millions of people, and
I'm not disputing that it can possibly be incredibly safe, and I don't want to. Again, I don't dismiss any person who chose to take this vaccine. People who choose to take it is not my issue.
Right.
My issue is the way the media and politicians have pumped this story. But we will see in a year. It's too soon for them to talk about how effective it is and the long haulers, and it's all too new for them to be using that language.
Well, the way they're saying it though is they are using it. I mean, I've heard it more of a scientific manner, right? They're like, it's effective to what we've known. They're like, what we've seen so far is so far, and that's what you see is basically like, whether it says so far in that word, in those exact words, but that's what they're saying is so far this is what we've seen, and that's all they can do is give us that information, and that's what it is. I mean, yeah, you can't tell me what this is going to do 10 years from now to our bodies because it's not 10 years later. But that's the way it is.
We'll see. I want to say one other thing before, because I know we're running close to time. But Abner made a comment that many other people have said forever, in regards to the police, is law enforcement's origins have deep connections to slave patrols.
Yeah.
Right. So if those are the origins of this system, right? If that's in there, why would this system change itself or even know how to change itself or look at the things that it's doing as incorrect? And that's what the problem is, that Derek Chauvin, again, he's a jackass at the low end of the, power chain.
Yes.
Only did this. You will only do this if something in you believed that you were going to be protected, right? You would only shoot some Walter Scott who was shot in the back. And the guy who shot him did actually go to prison, but that guy automatically called his superiors and started to say, well, he was aggressive. I had to do it. You only do these things. You only roll up and shoot 12-year-old Tamir Rice. You only roll up and just shoot Ma'Khia Bryant. You only shoot Oscar Grant, who was handcuffed in the San Francisco, the BART system, subway system, handcuffed behind his back, but was aggressive, and they shot and killed him. You only do these things if you believe the system that you are working in is not going to have a problem with it. And until that system is willing to acknowledge, I think there's a lot of police departments that are believing that because Chauvin was convicted, okay, the pressure's off of us now, and we don't have to do any reform.
Yeah, that makes no sense whatsoever.
There's work to do.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes no sense whatsoever.
So that's where I am with it this point.
I get it. And I'm, and I appreciate. I really like your perspective on this because part of me, and I guess that's the problem, is like I recognize the problem, but I haven't been a victim of the problem, right?
It's
And
privilege. And if
and
more
it is,
people
it
would
is
realize that, like you have a white privilege, right?
right.
We both have male privilege,
We both have
right?
male privilege, sure,
But people don't think about those things. I take walks at night because I love to. I love to take
right.
walks. Walking through Brooklyn at night, just clearing my head. Like it could be a dark street. I walk through the park, whatever. I don't think twice about it. Most of the women I know would never do that. They would never in a second think that I'm going to walk through this dark place by myself at night, right? There's levels of privilege, and if people aren't willing to, if people would stop taking it personally and feel like, oh, you're attacking me, like no one's attacking you. We're trying to get you to understand that there are systems built into culture, and if we don't step back and acknowledge our places within each of them, we can't fix anything.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And I think that like, and again, the biggest problem I have with people who like they freak out about this whole privilege thing is privilege doesn't mean you're rich. It
No.
doesn't, like, I think that's the big problem is a lot of people think that's what that is. You're like, well, I ain't got no privilege, and I'm sorry, I always have to do the redneck. Fucking, I don't know why. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, rednecks.
I'm having
Um,
access.
but 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 like it's that's not what we're talking about. I mean, it doesn't mean you have a nicer car. It doesn't mean you're richer or anything like that. It just means it literally it means like you have this nice little like layer of a shield
There are
that you
ways that you can move through the world
exactly.
that where you're very protected and you don't. The thing is, most people don't realize that they have a kind of privilege until it gets challenged.
Yes. Yes.
Then
Just
they
take it.
suddenly
Yes.
realize it.
And they suddenly realize it. Yes, exactly. And you don't realize that you had something that other people didn't have until
Yes.
it's done in front of you.
Yes.
But yeah, and so look, I want to say we didn't get too much into the police reform, which is actually what we're going to go into, but it's always a great conversation, man. So it's cool.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel like
we did.
we're tapping in the way that needs to be, and it's an
Yeah.
ongoing conversation. We can
Yeah.
talk more about it next time.
But it is more about community reform and the police understanding where the community needs to go. And there's a thing like, we live in a town. It's a small town, and it was interesting that we have police in our town, and I mean, good or bad jobs. I'm not going to get into the judgment of how they do. But what's interesting in that is that they don't live in our town, and
Right.
there's people who run our town center or work there and they don't live in our town. And I'm not saying that you have to live in our town to work there, but it helps, I think, when you actually have more investiture into the place that you're working when you're working for a city or government. And I think that's something that's really important. And one of the things I think the best way you're going to see the police being reformed, honestly, is if more black people were cops. I mean, and we do have a lot of African American cops, I know, but I mean, I'm just saying, like, there needs to be this thing because right now there's one of the problems, and Abner kind of talked about it earlier in our in his chat about like, well, wasn't really the creation of cops a way to go after runaway slaves in the first place? And there's this history of that and white supremacy in the police force already. I mean, and it's a perfect example. Like, you have this great movie, by the way. One of my favorite Spike Lee movies is Black Klansman. Uh,
Oh, that's interesting. I like it. It's not one of my favorites, but I saw it. I liked it.
well,
Yeah, yeah.
what I like about it is, first of all, it's kind of funny because it's a true story. It's based on a true story, and and that's what's kind of crazy about it. And it also took place in Colorado Springs, which is even weirder when you think about it if you know Colorado Springs. um, but what I loved is like you do see this take from when they're inside the white supremacists, and we already know that they've talked about this. They say, "Go be a cop, get yourself into positions of authority." That's the white supremacist movement as they've kind of gone underground and started doing it. And they have David Duke basically saying that in the
Mm-hmm.
movie. Whether that's an actual quote or not, I don't know, but a lot of that has been already kind of indoctrinated into that movement. Is like, get yourself in those positions of authority where you can do these things.
Yep.
And so there needs to
Yeah.
be like kind of a movement in that sense too, where we need more people who say, well, we need more responsible cops. We need more people to step up to be that responsible cop. And that's a hard thing. Like, I don't want to do that job, you know. But like,
No, it's never appealed to me.
yeah, but the only way to reform it is to reform who becomes a police officer, because, you know, at this point right now, like, yeah, you can have all the training in the world, honestly, Rob. But like you said, you're not going to see changes for 20, 50 years. There has to be a point where it's not attractive for a
Right.
white supremacist to be a cop.
You have to reform who becomes a police officer, and you also have to reform the concept of what is policing supposed to mean and do, right? Really quick, because like we're over time. But a friend of mine, her wife is German, and she was a police officer in Germany. So they're married now. They live in the United States. When I first met her, and I would talk about my dislike of the police and distrust of them, she couldn't get it. Like, I mean, she laughed initially because she couldn't comprehend how a person could. What reason was there to dislike the police so strongly? Right now, she gets it. But where she came from in Germany, she said the notion that you would even take out your gun was like insane. Like the last thing you would be looked at badly by other police if you even took your gun out, because you're supposed to find a gazillion other ways.
Last resort. Yeah.
But not here.
Not here. You know where you don't hear about police shootings? In England. Because they don't carry guns.
They don't carry guns.
They don't carry guns. No, they do. I mean, they have a like a SWAT team that will respond if there are guns, but they also have very strict gun laws, and so it's not something where like anybody can just carry a gun anywhere they go. And I always love how the double down is always more guns too for any argument. But anyway,
I feel like if you remove carrying a weapon, right? Yeah, like Wanda just said, there can be just as many black police officers who are bad as white cops.
Yeah, it is. It's who it is that becomes a cop.
The ability to carry a gun.
Yeah.
I wonder how drastic the sign up to be a police officer would be. How big the drop.
Oh, I'm sure. Because a lot of people will do that because they want to carry a gun. You know, I mean, or they were rejected by. I mean, I'm not saying this. Look, there's amazing most cops. I would like to think most. Are doing the job because they.
The number of them, yeah, I can't say most.
I know you can't say most, and that's why I said I would like to think most, and I think, and that's the white privilege thought process, I guess, is we want to think most, you know, and at least be. I'm optimistic towards it, but I understand why you wouldn't be. But I would like to think that most of them are doing the job because they actually want to, you know, protect the citizens. Black, white, brown, doesn't matter. You're here to make you know the world safer, right? And so those are the ones that we want to like continue to have coming in. And I don't think things like taking away their gun is the one that's going to kill their appetite for being a cop. And I do think that I think you're right. I think you'll find that there might be more people who want to be police officers if you have to have a partial or some kind of
some kind
credits.
Of post high school.
You know, in like psychology and understanding, and you know, obviously conflict resolution needs to be the majority of your job description should be educated in conflict resolution. And I think that's
mediation,
the thing.
All those things.
Yeah. But you know, you're talking about a massive infrastructure that needs to be changed, and that's. I don't know. You're right. Maybe 50 years is the number. I'd like to think we could do it in 10. I think 10 to 20 years in the reform side of things, it could happen if we were really aggressively going after it. But you got to be aggressive.
We shall see.
We shall see. That's right, man. All right. Well, thank you very much. We went a little bit over time, but it was a fun conversation. Yeah. And as always, fun. It's going to be a beautiful weekend here in Colorado. I don't know how it's going to be in New York and the rest of the country. Looking good. Right on. Yeah, we had a little bit of snow, as you know, Rob, but it is That's what it is. It's okay. It's gone in a day. It doesn't even last. It smells. But thanks everybody for listening. We got more and more announcements going to be coming up very soon, actually. But this has been a fun live stream in the mornings. It's kind of a great way to start
Yeah.
the day. Thank you very much for your comments today, Abner and Wanda. We really appreciate you guys joining in.
Yes, thank you.
And until next time, everybody.